Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This will be my full Last of Us Episode 5 video. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. We're doing a giveaway for HBO Max subscriptions. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and post your favorite moment from the episode on the video. Careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet. We'll start at the beginning, work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments. Starting with the episode title, Endure and Survive, which is a quote taken from the video game that Ellie has. The actual quote in the context of the game is from Ellie's comic book she reads during the car ride, which happened earlier on the way to Pittsburgh in the game. On the show, it's Kansas City that they're in. The comic book was called Savage Starlight, and she talks about the plot of the comic book with Joel, how dissatisfied she is with the ending, because it's a cliffhanger ending, and it's meant to be a metaphor for their adventures together, as it is in the episode, throughout the episode. The full quote is, "To the edge of the universe and back, endure and survive," and the characters in the comics speak it after a big battle. Ellie remembers the quote after one of their big battles with the Hunters, and during the episode, when they find the underground school, Ellie and Sam find one of the Savage Starlight comics from the series that they're currently collecting, and she speaks the line to him.
To the edge of the universe and back, endure, survive.
The edge of the universe and back. Endure and survive.
Excuse me?
Savage Starlight. That comic I've been reading? That's what the hero says after a big battle.
It's meant to be a metaphor of the way that the kids, Ellie and Sam, use the comic book as a way to pretend like things aren't so bad, to make themselves feel like superheroes, which is meant to be a parallel for Sam's drawings of he and his brother as superheroes and the superhero mask that he's wearing around throughout the episode. He's been pretending to be one of the heroes from Savage Starlight this whole time. I didn't see any big changes in the intro scene. The actual opening scene is a flashback to explain the origin of the Hunters in Kansas City. We see how they overthrew FEDRA, the events of the night that it all went down. We get the full backstory from both Kathleen and Henry throughout different parts of the episode, just talking about what happened and how things played out. The way they explained it, the FEDRA Military that was overseeing the quarantine zone in Kansas City were terrible, like way worse than you imagine. They abused their power, they abused the people physically and metaphorically, and that led to a resistance forming. Initially, the leader of that resistance was Kathleen's brother, Brian. The way that Kathleen talks about him, he was more of a positive vibes, pacifist kind of resistance leader, but everyone loved him. He was super charismatic. According to members of their group in present day, like Perry for instance, her brother never actually did anything, like never ultimately accomplished any of the real goals that their group had or affected any real change in the living conditions under FEDRA. The way that Perry talks about it, it was actually Kathleen who was the brains of the operation, whereas her brother was more like the face of the resistance. And Kathleen explains that she did terrible things, but did wind up accomplishing all their goals. But her leadership, her decisions are what allowed them to actually overthrow FEDRA. And the whole vibe that you're meant to get from her character is that compared to him, she's hardcore militant. She employed every dirty trick in the book, did all kinds of dark stuff that would normally haunt you for the rest of your life. They do a pretty good job of telegraphing her tragic end in the episode. Like, she has so many conversations about how she wants to get revenge on Henry when Joel is trying to be so understanding. You clearly see the direction her character's going, like, oh, she's definitely going to die some horrible death. But this is meant to be the reason in present day that Perry, the other Hunters, allow her to lead their group, because she's the one that got the job done overthrowing FEDRA, and it all went down so recently. Also, big Easter egg for the Last of Us video game, Perry is played by the same actor who did the voice for Joel's brother Tommy in the game. He's one of many video game cameo scenes so far. We'll see more of those in later episodes. Just to explain the timeline though, Henry and Sam have only been on the run for a short while in present day, so the Hunters just got done overthrowing FEDRA, and when she's interrogating the FEDRA collaborators at the beginning of the episode, that's only 11 days ago. So all these riots, this just happened. And while that was all going down, she swore revenge on Henry because he was forced to sell out Kathleen's brother Brian to FEDRA to obtain leukemia medicine for his brother Sam. He gave FEDRA the leader, quote-unquote, of the resistance. Kathleen implies that they tortured and killed Brian in front of her eyes, and it either drove her mad, or maybe she'd always been just a little bit dark or gotten darker because of what had happened under FEDRA rule for the past 20 years. As Henry explains it, FEDRA had been so terrible, it turned the inhabitants, like the Hunters here of Kansas City into the quarantine zone, into animals. And when they overthrew FEDRA, instead of doing what normal people would do, like pat each other on the back and try to make an even better version of society, it just drove them to an even darker place. They got even more violent. Like, violence begets more violence, abuse begets more abuse. as if life under FEDRA turned normal people into monsters, into the Hunters, because they're meant to be like a dark mirror faction to the Fireflies faction, even though the Fireflies also do a lot of terrible stuff too. There were a couple larger and smaller changes to the video games for the Hunters storyline. One of the bigger ones was what happened to the infected after the fungus initial outbreak. On the show, many years ago, before the insurrection, FEDRA drove the infected underground and trapped them there, so in present day, you never see any of them above ground, which is why so many of them come bursting out of the underground tunnels at the end of the episode like an infected piñata. During the beginning of the episode when they're rioting after getting rid of FEDRA, Kathleen's speech later reinforces the whole idea that violence begets more violence, abuse begets more abuse. When you see the Hunters start abusing the FEDRA agents, like start torturing and killing them, hanging them up all over the place. And Kathleen ordering the summary execution of all the collaborators after lying to them, saying that they would get trials. But to be fair, she did imply that they would die no matter what. Like, we'll give you trials, but you know how that's going to go. So if her ironic delivery of the line wasn't clear, everything's great now, Kansas City is free, clearly everything is not great. It's just meant to be another example of how people are just as bad as the infected, which is also a reference to an Easter egg for later in the game for the Ish character, which I'll talk about, because it's a very special moment. It's like one real small note, but it's this huge side story in the game, this huge backstory. There's moments like that all over the Last of Us episodes where like there's this tiny little thing in the background, has like this 10-minute backstory to it. We see Henry using the chaos to try and run to the doctor's hiding spot with Sam. One of the big changes here from the game is that Henry and Sam were not originally from the same city as the Hunters, and on the show it was also Pittsburgh, and apparently the showrunner just really hates Pittsburgh for some reason. Don't know why, but that's why he made the city Kansas City. And in the game, Sam isn't deaf and he doesn't have leukemia. He's just like a normal little kid that Henry's trying to take care of. They also didn't have the whole Kathleen versus Henry backstory too. That was completely brand new for the episode. Kathleen herself was not a character from the games, but in the game, just like the show, they were still trying to escape the city they had come through, and they were just trying to make their way west to the other Fireflies. On the show, though, they weren't specifically looking for other Fireflies, they were just looking to get west. In the game, the reason why Henry was so afraid of the Hunters and wanted to avoid them is because he thought that they would just kill Sam because he wasn't pulling his weight and they didn't like little kids, like they were just more hungry mouths to feed and they had limited resources. We find out that the Dr. Kathleen just executed in episode 4 took pity on them and gave them his shelter, which he himself got from another FEDRA guard that owed him a favor. Their storyline then catches up with Joel and Ellie's storyline in present day when the Doctor doesn't return. That was also meant to be the day Kathleen captured and shot him. That's why he didn't come back. And they're forced to seek shelter in the same office building where they met Joel and Ellie. But the idea is that Henry was trying to follow them, and that's why they came to the same office building, because he was looking for Joel, thinking that they could help each other escape. It wasn't like they accidentally ran into Joel and Ellie. There were a lot of moments here that were from the game, but from different parts of the game. So there's some subtle changes in the way they meet up, and them meeting up in the office building just in general. In the game, it was just a normal apartment building, and it was during the daytime, and they have a knockdown, drag-out fight. But, just like on the show, Sam is the one that has the gun on Joel, getting them to stop fighting.
Yeah, I thought you were one of them, too. Then I saw you. If you haven't noticed, they don't keep kids around. Survival of the fittest. Ugh.
There was also a sound-based trap, like Joel set one up outside the door, but in the game, they found that later in the underground tunnels. One of the other parallels between Kathleen and Joel briefly here, like they're meant to be dark mirrors of each other. Joel meant to be the more positive end of that, Kathleen the more negative end of that. But in both cases, they equally hate collaborators. Like Joel doesn't want to have anything to do with Henry when he finds out that he was a collaborator, until later in his character arc, he starts opening up to him and he starts to understand why he did what he did and forgive him. Whereas Kathleen, not so much. No forgiveness happening there. But that's one of the reasons why Kathleen is meant to be one of the most tragic characters in the show, because all the characters in general are tragic characters. It's just that Kathleen happens to be the most tragic because she doesn't learn anything from her experiences, and it winds up leading to her eventual death. You'd probably still be alive if you hadn't spent all that time chasing Henry down, wouldn't let all those infected escape either. You start to notice Perry too. He even seems like he wants to take pity on Henry and Sam. Like, do we need to worry about these two little kids? Like, come on, there's way more important stuff we should be worried about. When Henry and Sam meet the Doctor for the first time in his hiding spot, his line, "Why go through the trouble? You can kill yourself right here," is meant to be dark foreshadowing for their deaths, because he eventually does wind up killing himself and the brother when they're near the city. I already explained Sam's superhero drawings and the connection to Ellie's Savage Starlight comic book, but the drawings themselves are also meant to tell their history in life under FEDRA, like all these big fights that they had with the FEDRA soldiers. When they finally do meet Joel and Ellie, their relationship is relatively similar to what it was in the games too. Joel starts out not trusting or caring about them, like, we don't want to deal with this, we're just going to do our own thing. He reluctantly agrees to help them until eventually they warm up to each other. In the game, it was the Pittsburgh Bridge they were trying to get across, like that was their big point of escape. On the show, there was a bridge that they did reference, but it wasn't as big a part of the episode. Ellie's relationship with Henry and Sam was relatively similar to what it was in the game. She's happy to have them along, keeps bugging Joel about letting them come to Wyoming and the Fireflies with them. On the show, Henry isn't as explicit about their plans after escaping, only that he wants to go west to try and find a doctor who might be able to treat Sam's leukemia. In the game, they straight up wanted to go find the Fireflies, and in both cases, the game and the show, Joel waits till much later before finally offering to let them join their group and go with him to Wyoming and eventually to the Fireflies.
Look, I don't know exactly how I'm getting to Wyoming. I'm probably walking. You know, if you want to.
Yeah.
I know a guy. My brother, actually. He was a Firefly. Last I heard, he was in Wyoming. We get there, we find him, we find the Fireflies. What do you say, you in?
Sounds like a good plan, man.
When Henry sees Sam laughing out loud, enjoying himself, with Ellie remarking on how long it's been since he's heard him laugh, that's also right out of the games. The general plan for escape by going underground was similar to the games too, with a few minor changes in the way that their route played out. They weren't in the office building when they were planning the escape, but they did pass through an office building on the way. When they enter the tunnels and find the underground school, that's right out of the games. The history they explain on the show is also relatively similar. It started early on after the fungus spread, and eventually the kids either grew old and aged out of the school, they left on their own accord, or they just died either by fungus or some other illness. Like as Joel implies, they didn't follow the rules and they all got infected, eventually rendering the school uninhabited. They combined a couple scenes from the games with this too. In the game, they pass through a toy store and Sam starts playing with toys because he's a little kid. Of course he's going to play with the little toys, but Henry stops him. On the show, they kind of gave that storyline to Joel, where the others bug him about stopping and playing with the toys and just chilling out, and he reluctantly agrees. Generally, these scenes of them chilling out together are pretty similar to what they were in the games. Ellie and Sam play with the toys, find the new issue of Savage Starlight. She speaks the hero's quote to him about survival. The rules on the board here are meant to be an Easter egg for a sign they find underground in the game. On the wall, there's a huge Easter egg Joel finds for a character named Ish. In the games, when they're making their way through the abandoned school area, Joel finds a letter from a character named Ish that reads, "I'm gone for a few months, and the world doesn't waste any time going to shit. Everywhere you turn, they're infected, non-infected, trying to kill you. Mankind is back to the food chain, baby. I'm kind of shocked I've survived this long. These sewers seem pretty safe, limited exits, entrances, make it easier to defend, and if anyone gets in here, I can lose them in the maze. I might not be tough, but I am quick. Maybe I just need to bide my time down here until it all gets sorted out up there. I think I'll become a sewer mole man for a while. Wish me luck. Signed, Ish." And in the games, Ish was a character that just moved into this area of the school after it had been abandoned. According to Neil Druckmann, originally his name was meant to be a reference to the protagonist Isherwood Ish Williams in the post-apocalyptic novel Earth Abides from 1949 by George R. Stewart. And the plot of Ish's life was meant to be similar to the plot of the main character from the novel. He also said it was supposed to be ambiguous as to what happened to the Ish character in present day, whether or not he died or he survived and continued on. Based on the drawing, though, they make it sound like Ish was just one of the people who was tasked with protecting the kids after the initial fungus spread and the school was created. When they're looking at the cover of the Savage Starlight, you see the woman here. The woman on the cover is meant to be a metaphor for Ellie. The person fighting with her is meant to be a metaphor for Joel. Joel apologizing to Henry for being mad at him for being a collaborator. Another example of how he's softening up, learning to be more understanding, opening up to people just in general, the positive influence of Ellie on him. As opposed to Kathleen, who went through similar circumstances, but it's more like her villain origin story. And when Henry is explaining the truth of his backstory and how he became a collaborator, what happened with Brian and Kathleen, his whole arc with Kathleen is meant to be a metaphor for Joel's relationship with Ellie and things that he will be driven to do in the future, decisions he'll be forced to make. Because as Kathleen talks to him later, like while she's got the gun on him before she dies that terrible death, Kathleen starts talking about the needs of the many versus the needs of the few and how Henry chose his brother over the good of the many. Joel will be forced into a similar situation where he has to decide whether or not Ellie's safety is worth the rest of the human race.
Did it feel good betraying your neighbors to FEDRA so that you could get medicine?
Well, kids die, Henry. They die all the time. You think the whole world revolves around him? That he's worth everything?
And I think that whole arc, like everything they did, including Kathleen with the whole backstory with Henry, was for a future twist towards the end of the season. No spoilers about what that is. We can talk about it again during the finale, but I specifically think some of those moments were meant to set up that big twist at the end of the season. And what'll happen is that his time with Henry and Sam and listening to what Henry did, why he did it, will help inform his choices in the future, for better and worse. Joel does wind up doing a lot of very controversial things. You really start to see how crazy Kathleen is, though, when they go back to her inside her childhood room, and it just seems like she is stuck in the past, metaphorically and literally, like she's standing in the past, metaphorically. Her whole speech about not doing what her brother wanted, he told me to forgive Henry, but no way I'm gonna do that. They really wanted to telegraph her death during this episode. Like, okay, this is the 100th time she's talked about chasing Henry down and not forgiving him, probably gonna be dying at the end of this episode. When they come above ground and they run into the sniper, this housing area is similar to that part of the game where Joel also has to sneak into the house and take the sniper out, and during another part of their flight, Henry and Sam try to bail on Joel and Ellie, leaving them behind. On the show, that only lasted for a hot minute. They ran right back. In the game, it just took a little bit longer before they met back up. Also in the game, after Joel takes out the sniper, he uses the sniper's position in the rifle to take out other hunters from a distance, but there weren't nearly as many hunters and they didn't have a giant fountain of infected pouring out of the ground. But in the game, this is where Sam did get bit while they were trying to escape. They just did it a little bit differently. There was a bridge on the show that they had to cross, but it wasn't quite as big as it was in the games. They pay off a moment from way back in episode 4 where Ellie asked Joel about the military plows when the hunters try to plow her down literally, and the others, it even has the word run written on it. Then the truck blows up and allows the infected to escape the underground tunnels. The bloater here is actually something that they saved from the games that originally they fought way back at Bill's. Bloaters are meant to be a future evolution of the infected with ultra tough hides that are resistant to bullets, and in the game they also throw spore bombs. They're not doing spores on the show though. The way they're using the bloater on the show, though, he's more like a berserker, like a tank in fungus form. Love some of the practical effects here, too, like the little girl that almost got Ellie being the one to take out Kathleen. Also, really happy we finally got to see some infected in this episode. There were a couple episodes where we really didn't get that many infected. Then after they escape, this is all right out of the game. The way the rest of the episode goes down, for the most part, they hole up in a motel. Joel offered to let them join the group permanently earlier in the game, but it's the same concept. He tells them the rest of their plans. You can come with us if you want. Ellie also ends the night having fun with Sam in the conversation that Sam has with her about being afraid and whether or not the infected remember their lives as humans. Is there a human still inside the monsters? Exactly the same as it was in the game.
How is it that you're never scared?
Who says that I'm not?
What if the people are still inside? What if they're trapped in there without any control of their body? Scared of that happening to me.
One of the minor changes here, though, is that in the game, he didn't reveal to her immediately that he'd been bitten. He just attacked her the next day. You don't see he's infected until after he's turned into a runner. But just like in the game, Henry is the one to kill him, then horrified at his actions, turns the gun on himself. R.I.P. Henry and Sam. I feel like the actors on the show did a great job. It was very close to the version of the video game. On the show, they actually do wind up showing you that they buried the bodies, and Ellie left the sorry note because she believed that her blood would cure his infection, which it didn't. I also think the TV show added that moment with the sorry note and her trying to use her blood to cure him for something that will happen at the end of the season to set up like a big twist and make it a little more believable. Also, please don't post spoilers for that in the comments. We'll talk about it later this season. The ending song over the credits this time was Fuel to Fire by Agnes Obel, which is a reference to the big fight that they just had with the fire and the infected coming for them. I don't think the song was used in the games, but most of the music on the show has some connection to the games. If there's any Easter eggs or references that you spotted in the episode that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. My episode 6 trailer video will post next. In my full episode 6 video will post next week. I believe they're going back to the regular schedule, and episode 6 will be on Sunday next week. There'll be a ton of Super Bowl trailers dropping this weekend. Of course, I'll do videos for everything. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. Everyone click here for The Last of Us Episode 6 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post that video, and click here for all my other Last of Us episodes. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.